I would have to join Chris in saying, I don't know that I want to follow Claire. And part of the gift of Stewardship Sunday and those witnesses is it's a reminder to us of the joy of being within a community of faith that's seeking to grow together and be in ministry together. So keep that in mind as we dive into our text today. Today we hear from Luke chapter 18. Has anybody here ever wanted to be a part of another group? You see a group and you want to be a part of it. We call it FOMO at our house, fear of missing out. And our daughter has it in spades. She really doesn't want to miss out on something that she feels like. Anybody else relate there? It's okay to admit it. If ever there were a time that I don't want to be a part of the group, it's at the beginning of our parable today. Jesus told this parable to some who trusted in themselves, that they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. I'm good, Jesus. I don't need to be a part of that group. Jesus tells a story today about two people, two prayers, and a God who listens. He's telling this story, of course, to a group of people who trust in themselves, that they were right, that they were righteous, and regarded others with contempt. In the parable, we meet two characters, both coming to the temple, both praying to God. The first, a tax collector. The first a Pharisee, the second a tax collector. The Pharisee, the religious leader, stands by himself, praying to God. I thank you. It's a good way to start a prayer. Amen. I thank you that I'm not like other people. Thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of my income. Now, I must confess to you that parables are meant to be short lessons, but I feel like the Pharisee probably had more to say. He probably had more to say about his own practices and about how what he was doing lined up with being a faithful follower, of being faithful to God in his practices. The second, quite different. The tax collector, standing far off, not standing in the front or in the middle, would not even lift his eyes to heaven, but beating his breast says, God be merciful to me, a sinner. Both come to pray, but Jesus says only one leaves justified. Only one leaves transformed. As I come to our story today, one of the challenges is the mirror that it invites us to hold up. It's an uncomfortable mirror to hold, if we're really honest. How often do I compare myself to others? How often do I allow my worth to be shaped by the comparison that I have with those around me? A good friend of mine once said that comparison is the thief of joy, and I think she's right. Because often if we're looking to the other and what they're doing or not doing, we're not necessarily being honest with ourselves, because our focus is on the other person. How easily it seems that we might put too much confidence in our own rightness, our own sense of how we see ourselves, and our sense of being greater than the person standing next to us. As I heard this story, it brought to mind in many ways the many ways in which I myself might fall victim to being a Pharisee quite regularly. Yes, that you're a religious leader, you're a pastor, much like you maybe grew up in a world where we're invited to compare ourselves to others around us, their success, their failures, of how well I'm doing versus how well somebody else is doing. And now we have wonderful, complicated algorithms that rank us, which makes it even better. Amen? Said no one. The reality is that the Pharisee is self-deceived. You see, he's come and he has the right practices. His focus is to God. He starts with thanksgiving. He is doing some of those disciplines that are meant to connect you more deeply, but he has put more trust in his own practice and in himself and has not come to acknowledge his own need for mercy. He has become blind to his own need to grow. His own growing edges are blind to him. It's easier to point to the brokenness or the sin of another than to acknowledge his own. Right? Hear him in his prayer. I'm glad that I'm not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even this tax collector. The list of those things, certainly we could go deeper and explore. The tax collector, though, comes a different way. You see, the tax collector illustrates a different way of praying. He doesn't defend or explain himself. He simply comes as he is, honestly, humbly. It's the kind of honesty that opens space for grace. In his words, we glimpse what choosing faith might look like. It's not self-assurance, it's surrender, friends. It's not self-criticism either, but an honest awareness of his need for God's mercy. As I listened to this story throughout this week and allowed it to sit with me, I couldn't be helped but brought to a scene of a popular show that maybe many of you have watched. It may be the reason that many signed up for Apple TV for this long. The show is called Ted Lasso. I deeply love Ted Lasso. I like his character. I like the way he approaches life. He invites a kind of honesty that I didn't see in a lot of shows. Now, for those who haven't seen it, let me introduce you briefly to the character, Ted Lasso. He was an American football coach who moved to the UK to lead a very different football team, because football in the UK would be soccer. And needless to say, an American football coach leading a European soccer team made for plenty of opportunities for comedy and jokes. And his character, as he's living into this role, is regularly made fun of. But one of the tensions that emerges very early in the show is that the team's owner is divorced. And her ex-husband regularly likes to make her life miserable. He's an arrogant character in the story, not really likable. In one episode, Ted and his boss are there gathered at the pub with the local community, and in walks the ex-husband. And there's this tension that's already present. You can sense it in the scene. And in the midst of it, there becomes this competition, this kind of ranking. And so Ted invites him to a game of darts and offers a wager. If you win, you get to pick the starting lineup for one of the most crucial games of the season. But if I win, you can't go anywhere near the owner's box. Now, I'll leave it to you to watch the scene, because needless to say, his boss, the ex-wife, has some choice words for Ted about what he thinks he's doing. And of course, the ex-husband opens a nice set of darts that clearly show that he has played often, because who else is carrying around darts in their pocket? Thinking that he has come and he's got the upper hand. They begin playing, and Ted is losing. So it would seem. He turns to the pub owner to ask what's needed to win, and she tells him, and the whole room kind of drops because they think how unlikely it is. He hits the first time, but he begins his monologue where he says, people my whole life have often judged me and misjudged me. He goes, once I saw a sign that invited curiosity. What I found is that all those who judge me lack curiosity. They weren't curious. They were too busy judging me to be curious. You see, if you'd asked, hey, Ted, have you ever played darts? I would have told you yes. Every Sunday with my father till the age of 15 when he passed. And he hits it. And then, of course, right before the end, he uses his signature phrase, barbecue sauce, and hits the bullseye. Friends, in our story, if we're not careful, we as the church look more like the Pharisee and more like the one who thinks they've got the upper hand in the scene from Ted Lasso. If we're too busy judging what others are not doing, and we don't have a sense of curiosity, we miss incredible opportunities to be in relationship, to have conversation, to really invite people into the faith. You see, the tax collector came acknowledging he had a need for mercy. He could not fix the mess that was his life or that had become that moment. He needed grace and mercy. In case you didn't know it, all of us do. You see, all of us have fallen, have made mistakes. All of us have done something that has harmed those we love. All of us have had moments where we've messed it up. Amen? All of us need grace. No one's exempt from that. And the tax collector glimpses that more clearly than the Pharisee in our story. But I add this story of Ted Lasso because I wonder, what might it look like for the church to increase its curiosity? If we know that everyone's in need of grace, instead of judging what we see of someone's story, what might happen if we invite them to share it? Claire gave a beautiful example of how her life has been changed and transformed being a part of Appalachian Service Project, where meeting people that she thought she was coming to do projects and work in their home, and she found that her life was changed. She met people who exemplified such depth of faith and trust in God's presence and provision. They gave witness to her through their story and their life. And she's not the only youth I've heard give witness to that. That's one of the gifts over the 55 years of Calvary's history with Appalachian Service Project that has been an ongoing piece. If you were at the stewardship breakfast this morning, one, bless you. You likely are now feeling the carbohydrates from Cracker Barrel settle in. And I recognize that. But I also want to say one of the gifts was we lifted up that this year was 55 years of Appalachian Service Project. And there's a great picture of the team holding the award that was given. But what you may not realize is that's more than 50,000 hours of service in rural Appalachia. That is thousands of lives touched over 55 years, both of those that were served in the community and of the young people and adults from this congregation whose lives have been transformed and changed because of that ministry. And it was Tex and Rosemary and a few other dedicated lay people who felt a call and said yes. They didn't have it all figured out. In fact, they went on an exploratory trip and built it out of that. What would it look like for the people of Calvary United Methodist Church to be more curious in our community? I meet more and more people every day in this community and around who don't know about the church or faith. They have more questions and concerns. I spent an afternoon yesterday with a lovely person that my daughter has become friends with her daughter. And it took a little bit to say, I want you to be free to speak. I know I'm a preacher, but please don't assume that means I have an agenda here. I really want to hear your story. And every time I invite that, I meet people who bring with them both joy and some real baggage about church, about what it means to follow Jesus, about the role of the church in their lives. And they want to know, will I be curious enough to listen, or will I be too quick to judge? And I work really hard at being curious. In fact, I do my very best to not tell them I'm a preacher until I have to, because it kills the conversation. In case you didn't know, so when I meet one of your friends, don't immediately out me. Because it really kills the conversation. Because then they feel like they can't be honest, they can't cuss, and they start hiding the wine glass. And I need them to be honest. You see, the tax collector in our story was honest. He reminds us that confession is courageous, not shameful, because it acknowledges our need for our dependence and our need for God's grace. You see, the good news is that humility is not humiliation. We've mistaken that as a people. No, humility is freedom. It's letting go of the need to be right or worthy and learning to depend more upon God's mercy. So this week, I'm going to invite you to pray with the tax collector. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Now, that's a hard prayer because if we're really honest, the voice that lives within us that's our inner critic might immediately take over and begin to diminish us by all the things we don't get right. I have that voice. Maybe you do too. But this week, I want you to pray that prayer. You can do it as a breath prayer where you breathe in, God, be merciful to me, a sinner, when you exhale. But this week, I want you to pause long enough to sense God's mercy already meeting you where you are as you pray. I think the tax collector models to us the courage to be honest in prayer. And here's what I believe deeply. When we're honest in prayer, we meet a God who loves us and who meets us where we are. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And I pray that this week you will experience and glimpse that mercy as well. Amen.